I'd like to call our meeting to order. Today is Monday, August 10th, and this is a regular Board of Education meeting. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Before we start the meeting, I'd ask for someone to read the approval of the agenda.
That the agenda of Monday, August 10th, 2015 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth, and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Please.
Second.
This is a roll call action.
Director Humbles. Director Anhalt. Director Laverty. Director Rosenthal. President Meisterling.
Aye. Thank you. Next, I'll turn it over to Dr. Buck for a superintendent report.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a number of items that are important and worth highlighting this evening, so I'll run through those, and then I have one comment from the Gazette article. So 6 schools in the district will receive K-3 innovative grants for at-risk students for the Iowa Department of Education for this 15-16 school year. The buildings will use the funds to support additional staff to work with students needing extra support. Grants were awarded to Harrison, Hoover, Taylor, Van Buren, and Wright Elementary Schools, as well as the Johnson STEAM Academy. The district's currently seeking members for the Diversity Committee. Volunteers will serve a 3-year term beginning September 1st. The mission of the Diversity Committee is to ensure that there is unbiased and equal support for all learners. Applications are available by calling the district office, and the deadline to apply is August 28th. The foundation received an anonymous donation of $35,000. So $25,000 will be added to the Student Enrichment Grant Program, providing enrichment activities that align with what's being taught in our classrooms. And $10,000 will help fund the foundation's SAFE program, which assists at-risk low-income students who want to participate in school-sponsored extracurricular activities. The district's been recognized by the state for its green efforts by receiving the Governor's Iowa Environmental Excellence Award. The recognition notes that the efforts of the district are serving as a model for the state, and I think the governor even had some additional comments about the former director, I think, is part of that joke. We recently enjoyed a visit by a group of high school students from India. Their trip was part of a continuing cultural exchange program coordinated by the Transitions Lab University Prep School, working with the school district. The high school students and their principal had the opportunity to meet with the community and education leaders, tour the University of Iowa, and participate in mock classes at Kennedy High School. A send-off event featured a special dance presentation by the students. And we're looking forward to celebrating the opening of the Johnson STEAM Academy Magnet School with a special program and ribbon cutting on the first day of classes. That's Monday, August 24th. Building tours will be held from 9:30 to 10 with the program at 10 a.m. Community members are invited to join us for this special event that will include student entertainment, special speakers, a proclamation by the mayor, and the ribbon cutting. And I also understand that there'll be a very large bubble machine as part of the celebration. Not sure exactly what that means. The final item is this. In the August 5th Gazette, there was an article, and you may have seen it, about billions of dollars for professional training for teachers called a waste. So that was in there. And one of the quotes they said is, a new study of 10,000 teachers found that professional development teacher workshops and training that cost taxpayers billions yearly largely is a waste. And so I don't know if you had a chance to see that. And so I highlight that only because one of the things we're going to hear about tonight is our teacher leadership system. And what I would say is, having seen lots of teacher leadership dollars spent in our state over the years and in local school districts, I don't know that I would quantify it as a waste. I just don't know that we ever were able to optimize those dollars like they were necessarily intended. And really what I think you're going to hear tonight is a conversation about the work that's underway here in Cedar Rapids with our teacher leadership system, that really when you take that system in combination with professional development activities and dollars, you really do start to get at optimizing that system to help better inform the work of our teachers. So I read that and I thought, you know, probably in that system up to this point, there might be some validity at least to the conversation, but I think you heard good news tonight about what's happening in Cedar Rapids relative to professional development.
Thank you. Okay, board reports. John?
So I just want to let everyone know that Mary and Gary Anhalt and I had a chance to tour Washington High School on Thursday with some of the district administrators, the contractors, Shive Hattery, and others that are working on the project, and are real pleased with the progress. They had a little delay, and they're really, it looks like, caught back up to be ready for the opening day of classes and ready for kids. So we're excited to see that. Just one other thing, there is the school board election coming up on September 8th, and I'll just say that absentee ballots started to become available today. So we encourage everybody to get out, no matter who you vote for, and just get out and be part of that process.
Thank you, John. Other board reports or comments? I would like to just add, in our Washington tour, it looks like a brand-new school. It just simply is beautiful and optimizes space for students, and we should be very proud of the way that work is going. So thanks for taking the time to tour. Also want to thank that anonymous donor to our foundation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is just outstanding, and those dollars will be put to good work for our kids. Next is our consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything for separate consideration? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Any discussion items? I do have one. I wanted to ask Lori Bruzak to talk a little bit about the joint communications work that we have with the Lynn County and city. Just as a reminder, we haven't heard much about this over the last couple of years, so if you could talk about it.
The Joint Communication Network was an endeavor by the city, the county, and the schools to build a fiber network to connect our facilities. We started that process pre-flood, and it was delayed because of the flood. So between 2006 and 2012, it was substantially built. We built approximately 130 miles of fiber infrastructure. And within that fiber infrastructure, there is spare fiber. And in our 28E agreement, it was planned that that spare fiber could be used as a revenue source and as well as for joint activities between the three entities.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, Gary?
Will it, do we still have, will there still be room for expanded use for the district? Will their capacity still be there if we need more?
Yes, actually, a couple things. First off, the district has assigned fibers that are not part of the spare fibers that are dedicated just for district use throughout the infrastructure. And then this agreement that we're looking at tonight in the city working on a lease of some of the fiber assets actually brings more fiber assets into the project. 20 miles, they're going to provide us additional fiber. So I think that answers your question.
I think the way technology is moving, it seems like you can never have enough storage space, you can never have enough bandwidth, so just want to make sure that we be able to continue to improve if we need to.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ann?
Not directly related, but in the same family of technology, is there any discussions related to like a community-wide wireless network?
The city has piloted community wireless in the downtown area, and we're anxiously monitoring that. And then we're also looking at ways that we can make our school sites hotspots also, community
Okay.
hotspots, but it wouldn't reach out quite as far as to cover everything.
Super, thank you.
Okay. This is a roll call action due to the personnel report.
Director Anhalt. Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Humbles. President Meisterling.
Aye. Next, I'll turn it over to Val to talk about the extended day program and supplemental education.
Yes, I have two coordinators with me tonight. Nancy Buckley is going to present first on our extended day program. Both of these programs are elementary programs, and the extended day program is funded through our general budget. And then Cheryl Johnson will follow up with her report on our supplemental educational services. And that is, right now, those are programs that are coming into our buildings or happening outside of the school time even for students that have instructional needs and qualify based on supplemental educational services. So I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Right. I am Nancy Blocker, and I facilitated the extended day program this last school year, so the 14-15 school year. And as you notice on the PowerPoint, I just want to do a quick kind of overview of what that program entailed. That was either a before or an after-school tutoring program funded out of the general budget in all 21 elementary schools. And for most of the schools, we tried to get 16 student contact hours in, so that would have been 8-week session in the fall and then another 8 weeks in the spring. We had a little variance there based on conferences coming into play, Iowa assessments, and then, of course, snow days impacted that a little bit. But that was our goal, to get those 16 hours in the fall and then in the spring. We also identified students based on academic needs. So that could have been students who were non-proficient in reading, in math, or in both areas. So those were our focus areas. Each school then could determine how they met their individual students' needs. So they really did customize their program. They might focus just on reading. They might focus on math. They might have done both. They might have focused just on 1 or 2 grade levels, or they might have worked with students that were K-5. It really was left up to those buildings to determine where their greatest need was and then how to differentiate for their student population. They used multiple criteria when they were identifying those students, so they looked at Iowa assessment. They looked at our FAST assessment, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and other proficiency levels. And then we tracked those scores to kind of see how those students did. Most of our teachers, or teachers providing instruction, were regular classroom teachers already in our buildings. We also had some subs who came to work for us, and we also had some associates who were certified teachers who then could also provide those services in a before-after school kind of setting. Whoops, too fast. So if we look at, I think you have in your board packet, I believe you have a chart that says EDP Fall 2014 school/district averages, and then one for the winter/spring, I believe. Hopefully you have those. So I want to talk a little briefly about our data and what we looked at. So you can see along the left-hand side, we have all of the schools listed. You have information about what grade levels we're focused on. So some schools did 3rd, 4th, some did 1st through 3rd. It really did depend on the school. The number of students is also listed. And then we looked at some of our assessment. And the main reading assessment was the FAST assessment. So that's the formative assessment system for teachers. That was just started last fall. And we looked at 2 pieces of that. We looked at the CBM, that's the curriculum-based measurement, and that essentially measures correct words per minute or fluency. And so you can see an average growth on your handout for each school, what their average growth was. And again, that's related to fluency and words per minute. And then we looked at A reading, and that's measuring effective literacy instruction. So we're looking at vocabulary, grammar, comprehension. It's more inclusive. And you can again see how students did as far as their points on that assessment, their average points that they gained on that assessment. The other assessment we looked at was the Math District Common Core Assessment. And we looked at standards, so the number of standards students met on that particular assessment. We also listed the number of sessions that they had, and again, it varied a little bit. You'll notice Erskine had 24, and that's because they were running half-hour sessions 4 times a week as opposed to 1-hour sessions 2 times a week. We did an average day attended and then percentages, and that's the same information, same type of information for the fall scores and then the spring scores. And then if we look up here, I kind of averaged all of the scores together. So in the fall, we had 359 students participate. The average growth was 22.4, and that's on that CBM. That's that fluency or automaticity test. The A reading average growth was 13.6 points, and the math was 4.95. And then for the winter spring, we had 432 students attend, obviously 20.6 points increase in their CBM, 8.6 in A reading, and then the math growth was 8.2. And I did go back and kind of look at this. About 51% of our students attended both sessions. So it's a little tricky to compare the fall and the winter spring exactly because it's not the same group of students. So as I said, about 51% of them were same students in the fall and the spring session. Any questions on anything I've gone through? And I know it was quick.
Yeah,
Sure.
so there's some real discrepancies in the amount of growth in some of these areas between different schools.
Correct.
So what have you done to go back and try and figure out what made the difference in some
Right,
of these
right.
schools? I mean, Erskine, you mentioned they have 24 sessions, half hour each.
Right.
Their scores appear to be quite a bit higher than some of the other schools. I mean, there's other variances here, but.
Sure. One of the things that you have to keep in mind, and the principals get, what we share with them is their information for each of their students. And so some schools might have had students who were closer to being proficient and might be really close to that line and so showed major gains. There might have been other schools where students were well below the proficiency levels and then maybe their gains were maybe not as great. So you kind of have to go in and look at those individuals, and I think it's really hard to sort of determine, did this school do something that made a big difference that maybe this school didn't? Because the students were so very different, and what their starting point was varied kind of greatly, if that
So
makes sense.
have you gone back, though, and looked statistically to see what those variances were and see if there was a difference?
We have, and I couldn't pull anything out that said statistically this particular program made a bigger difference compared to this other program.
Okay.
Like I said, it became tricky just looking at comparing different students and kind of where they were initially. And if you had students who were really close to being proficient, they might have shown big growth. And then students who were really well below that proficiency level might have had a smaller amount of growth over that period of time. And again, it's a different group of students, about 51% is the same, so.
And one of those things, too, would be, you heard Nancy say that each building can, determine how they want to meet the needs of their students. What we do as an administrative group then, they just got this data, and we've had conversation now about what did you do, at Erskine? What are you doing? Is it better to focus on this grade level? Is it better to focus on multiple grade levels? That kind of thing. So we are having those conversations to learn from each other
Yeah.
and
Well,
what's
it's
better.
exciting for us as board members to see some schools getting some really nice
Right.
growth. I mean, that's what
Sure.
we're here for, is student
Absolutely.
achievement. That's our primary
Right.
focus. And so some of this looks awesome. Others, it
Right.
looks like maybe there's some
Right.
work needed. But again, with those variances, it would help us to understand,
Right, absolutely.
what's working, what's not working.
And some of them focus maybe just on reading, and some focus maybe just on math, and that might have made a difference too if that was their only focus as opposed to trying to meet all of those needs, both reading and math. So that came into play, I think, a little bit as well.
Great.
Yeah.
How were parents notified about this program to ensure that their child participated? And then also, I'm looking at the number 359. Can we get a breakdown of that by ethnicity of the students that participated in each one of those schools in the program?
We could, yes, yeah. They were notified, each school sort of determined how they notified parents, so some had individual letters that were sent to students. Again, the students were identified based on need, so it wasn't sent out to every child in the building. And then, as I said, some schools focused on just certain grade levels. Again, given the fact that they have limited resources, so, they weren't seeing every child at the building. They had to sort of define what is our greatest need. Some schools actually made phone calls to those parents and said, so I think it really depended upon that school's population and how they felt best to kind of communicate with parents, to follow up with parents. Students were given reports following the fall program and following the spring program, so I know communication was a big part of this.
And then also, because this is our first year with FAST, the Formative Assessment System for Teachers, it's a screening tool. And so one of the things we have to do is notify parents, and we did in the fall, and we do again in the winter. And a piece of that is, as a parent, here's another piece you can do, because it takes all of us, school and families, to improve reading instruction. And so that's one piece we can say, here's something that's offered at the school. The parent piece is, can you come pick them up an hour later, that kind of thing. And we've had pretty good participation based on that. And it's amazing. Some schools are doing whatever they can to make sure that kid can get there, even principals taking home, teachers helping to support whatever it needs to take to get them there.
We had site leaders at buildings who were physically driving students home after the school day if parents couldn't get them or pick them up. So, yeah. And again, I think the data gives you kind of a snapshot of what's going on there. It's not the only data that they would be looking at. There are other pieces as well, other ways they're tracking students too, so.
Anne?
Yeah, I was just curious how the school would decide which grades of students were eligible, because that's, looks like it's pretty much all over the map.
It is, and I think they look at, again, all of those assessment pieces. And, for example, you might have a school that had a greater need, let's say, in the first and second grades in reading, that was their area. Students weren't coming in proficient, and they needed that boost, and so that was where they were going to focus their energy. So I think it just depended upon what the school looked like, kind of number-wise, and where their greatest need was at the time. And some attempted to try and meet those K-5 needs. Again, maybe they had greater needs across those grade levels and had to take fewer students at each grade level. So it just kind of varied, I think, across the board a little bit.
And then just a follow-up to that, maybe for Val, is when does the reading proficiency to pass a grade, when does that kick in?
2017, May of 2017.
And
so
that's
then we need to have
third grade?
yes. Well, I
Okay.
need to have a summer program, and we just heard at SAI that there will be some pilot summer programs this next summer, as well as then there are criteria that you would then look for retention if they didn't participate in a summer program and thing like that.
Okay.
Something like
I
that.
just didn't know if this might connect to that.
And
as
you'll
well.
see quite a few of them are looking at second grade,
Okay.
that's a big year where we try to hit and support those students. That's not uncommon.
Okay, thanks.
And I think there were some schools that felt that way, saw that was coming, and so put some of their efforts into some of those earlier grade levels, so.
So what was the participation rate? You identified students, what percentage participated?
Well, you mean as far as the number of kids? Well,
Yeah.
the total number of kids are up there that participated. You mean the number that could qualify to participate? Probably per site, we are at around 20 to 24, 28, somewhere in there.
I would say somewhere in there, yes.
It kind of
yes.
depends.
Right.
We provided for them at least 4 teachers that we said we would fund, but then sometimes there was a need for more, and we would look at that and see what we could do, and other sites maybe had fewer needs, and so they weren't using as much, so we were able to adjust a little bit on a few sites that may have 5 classrooms. We try to keep the numbers right around 6 to 8 kids in a group, and they're, like I said, there's at least 4 teachers plus a site leader. And so there's always adults. We provide them a quick snack, and then we get into either reading or math or both.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're removing any barriers.
Right.
Transportation is certainly one of them, but if there are any others, because these kids need these programs,
Right.
and we need them to be successful. And then how are we positioning ourselves to become a pilot site for a summer reading program?
Well, right now we are not doing anything, I will tell you.
Okay.
With the new superintendent coming on board, Dr. Buck and I have not had that conversation. Dr. Benson said, let's wait and see for this past summer. But you're right, I think that needs to be something to look at. What the governor shared was about this much at SAI this last week. And just saying that there will be some pilots, and certainly I know we've always looked at trying to be one of those pilots, so we will do that. But that's as much as I know. I don't know if you know more,
Yeah,
Dr. Buck?
I think part of what will drive that conversation is they're actually intending to try to obtain private funding to resource those summer pilots. So to the extent that the governor's office is successful in obtaining funds for private resource to begin that piloting, I think then that'll impact the conversation about the number of schools that'll be able to have engaged in that work. So it's not a hedge, it's just I don't know how much they'll actually be able to get kicked in from our ministers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go ahead
Next piece is
then
SES.
and
Yeah.
let Cheryl go ahead and share about the SES program.
Could I just add one caveat to that? The 56 million or whatever that was vetoed, one of those 5 uses was one-time cost for some time of reading or math support function. So one argument that could have been made is they had a $56 million funding stream to get at piloting summer reading programs. But anyway, that's just a
Just a side note,
Side note.
another part of the impact of that veto, yes.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Johnson, and I facilitate the Supplemental Educational Services, which some refer to as SES. What the Supplemental Educational Services are, it's part of the mandate from No Child Left Behind. It's one of those sanctions for schools that are in year 2 in need of assistance. So there are some things that were similar as far as the EDP, the data, what we gathered was the same, but there are a lot of differences for the supplemental educational services. One of them being that this was targeted through the sanctions, not to the students with the academic need, but students, it was based on their income criteria. There were 12 schools that were eligible this year, and this is funded not by the general fund, but by the district's Title I funds. There's a 20% set aside that they have for the sanctions of No Child Left Behind. And the per pupil allocation was $1,171 per student, and that is determined by the state. So what the services are basically, in the third bullet there, it's tutoring. It's additional academic instruction that's outside of the regular school day. So it could be after school, it could be on the weekends. That's determined by the providers, and there are outside providers that provide this. The tutoring is supposed to be high quality, research-based, designed to increase student academic achievement. And that, again, the outside providers apply to be an SES provider, and then the state is the one that approves them. So the next bullet talks about some of the providers that were used last year. There was a list of 20 different providers that parents could choose from. And out of those 20 providers, parents chose 13 different providers. 12 of those providers were private for-profit businesses, and 1 provider was a nonprofit community-based organization. 6 of the providers provided face-to-face instruction, and 7 were online instruction. 5 of those providers gave the tutoring at school, and then the amount of instruction varied widely. Some providers gave 15 hours of instruction, where some gave 40 hours of instruction. The students that were served in the school, first of all, there was a total number of eligible students was 2,628. So there was a large number that were eligible. And that, again, is determined by income. The total number served was 362. Although there were 470 students that applied, for some reason or other, either the provider decided not to take the student or the parent decided it was not going to fit into their schedule. There were only 362 that did take the tutoring. On the next slide, you'll see this is exactly, we use exactly the same measures, which are our district measures, to check on the data, to check on the academic growth, actually what it was. And something that I really think is important to remember is that when we take these, this assessment, the students are doing the assessment in the classroom, and it's not just measuring what they're getting from the provider, it's measuring what they're getting throughout the day also. So it's, we don't have something clean that says, because of this provider, they grew this much, because it also includes their daily instruction. So again, we use the FAST assessment, the CBM, which is more of the correct words per minute, the A reading, which encompasses more of the literacy components like vocabulary and grammar. And then for math, we used, again, the Common Core assessment. So you also have a chart that says supplemental educational service providers, and this tells you who our providers were this year. It tells you what kind of format the instruction was. Was it face-to-face or was it online? What grades they served, the total number of students. And then the next column, the number of students that were instructed in reading, and the number that were instructed in math. And as you can see, some of the providers did both reading and math, some of them just did reading, some just did math. And then there was their growth there also.
So a question, so as I look at the data.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I look at the data and I understand that they're from different schools, but Kids on Course, as an example, is blowing some of these other ones out of the water with their achievement and growth across the board. And they're in some of our highest need schools in
Right.
Cedar Rapids. So as a district, when we go back to recertify some of these providers, do we go and say, you know, your kids actually lost ground. Your kids in your program didn't see any growth.
Unfortunately,
No.
we do not have that.
We don't do
It's
that.
the
The
state.
state
The
does that.
state. So as a board, do we need to be talking to the state folks and saying, you know, there are some of these providers that you've approved and told us to use, and our kids aren't gaining ground. I mean, we need to be focused on whatever Kids on Course or programs like that are doing. I mean, this is what we're all about, is kids
Right.
achieving, so.
Absolutely.
Right, and we are just required, because they're an approved provider by the state, to allow them to have access to our students. And I totally agree with what you're saying, and I certainly think, yes, you can contact, you know, the Department of Ed and say, we're concerned about some of these providers. We do make contacts to the state as well when there are concerns that we have as the year goes on, and make them aware of that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the services stop.
Do we make this data then aware to the parents so that they can make an educated choice? They can see that some of these providers aren't really showing any growth, some of them even negative growth?
There's a fine line we need to walk, because we don't want to put one provider over another. And an additional piece to this is that we have been granted the waiver this year to be our own provider again. So one of the things that we will do this year is, if parents ask for information, we will show them this data. But we won't publicly put that information out there. It's out there now, obviously, in board minutes and part of this presentation. But beyond that, we would not give it to parents, because we don't want to sell one or the other, because they would say we were. The other thing is, they use their own assessments, different than ours, and their assessments will say that their students made a year's growth or made even more than a year's growth. Again, not all of them have to use the same measure. They use their own developed measure in order to show growth.
I think another thing that we see by this is the number of hours offered. That program you talked about, Kids on Course, they offered the most hours from anybody. So that's another factor.
One of the caveats that might be worth just sort of throwing in here is we also need to sort of squint at the total number of students
Right.
engaged in the, because when you have small n size, there's lots of opportunity for variance, and so that variance can be more pronounced, because some of these are as few as 2 kids, which
Right.
underscores, honestly, kids on course results, because it's 156 kids. Now you actually are getting to a group of kids a size big enough that these data probably are worth taking a look. Yeah, so.
Right.
Val, did we see when we were able to be the provider, did we see more students? Did we have more students that were enrolled?
And
Was the
Cheryl's been
numbers
part,
higher?
yeah, Cheryl's actually been the facilitator of this program even longer than I've been in this position. And yes, we did see good growth with our program. 2 years ago, we were no longer able to do that, but we have gotten the waiver to do that program again. Again, we can't sell our program over another. We have to, all of them are
Right.
options to parents.
But
Are you-
besides just the individual growth, I mean, the enrollment numbers,
Oh.
did we
Right. The
have
enrollment-
higher enrollment numbers? Because
Yes, yes,
there's a number that aren't being served.
right.
That's right. The number did jump when we were our own provider, but then when we stopped being provider, it was 2 years ago. Has been 2 years when we weren't a provider, and it went down dramatically.
This all seems kind of ridiculous, doesn't
It
it?
does seem ridiculous.
I mean, it just doesn't seem to be organized to work, and we need
I
to
think it-
provide some data to the state that helps them make better selections on the providers that they approve.
And the other piece you should know is because we're one of the few states without a waiver,
Right.
we are obviously one of this, I mean, some of these providers are from across the country, so they're doing online programming from California and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of places that come to Iowa because it is one of the few SES providers.
I think
anyway.
there's only seven or nine that still are, get to do SES. And next year, I found out that there were 20 providers for this year. There's going to be 40 next year.
And does the state, with the variation in the hours, that's kind of baffling to me as
It's up to the
how-
provider. That's how it's written. They get the $1,171 per pupil to provide it however they need to provide it. And if it's only so many hours, or if it's 40 hours, that's determined by the provider, not by us.
And it's not determined by the state either. Their
No.
state doesn't have some requirement that they have to provide a minimum.
No.
If they did, the minimum would have been under, what was the least one, 16 or 15? I don't know if they have a minimum, but the lowest number of hours was 15.6 for last year.
Much work to be done in this area, and going to 40 providers is kind of scary. Okay. Thank both of you for coming and sharing this report and the work that you do in our district. Very much appreciated. Mary Ellen and Stephen to talk about teacher leadership update.
President Meisterling, Dr. Buck, and members of the board, it's my pleasure to share with you tonight the data that we have compiled on our teacher leadership system. It's hard to believe that it's been almost 2 years now since we began talking about the teacher leadership system. Back in October of 2013, I shared with you that there was this wonderful thing that was going to happen across our state, and that we were going to have the opportunity to apply for funding and support to begin a teacher leadership system in our district. And I want to compliment you because I know you're very data-driven and you've been very patient to wait almost 2 years for us to share those results tonight. So we're very happy to be here to share those results. One of the things I would remind you of, there were 10 parts to the application, not that you need to know that, but I did share those with you at one point in time when we were writing the plan. Part 8 of that application was about how we were going to measure our successes and monitor our growth. So it read, the district has a clear vision of how it will, A, measure the impact and effectiveness of achieving the goals described in the plan, and B, monitor and adjust the plan over time. So tonight, Stephen Provert, who is our teacher leadership system facilitator for the 14-15 school year, that inaugural year of our teacher leadership system, He's going to talk to you about how our monitoring was carried out and give you those results. So I'll turn it over to him at this point in time.
Thank you. I'm excited to do so. Back in February, I presented a graphic that looked a lot like this, and it was to show the different layers of evaluation that the teacher leadership system was going to be viewed under. And even at that time, we could speak to the equitable hiring process that we had put our teacher leaders through. So I spoke to that at that time, and then at our last board meeting, Carla Reese spoke to the district and state assessments in regards to student achievement. So my focus this evening is going to be primarily in those three middle layers that have to do with professional learning and the effectiveness of the teacher leadership program and the effect it had on instruction. So let's go ahead and start with professional learning. And when I looked here at the data, I was very excited about the effect that it seemed to have on our teacher leaders. We hit the ground running. We started professional learning in the summer of 2014 and rolled it right into the 14-15 year. We had these 4 questions that we asked every teacher leader. And what it tells me is that there was success in our professional learning that was delivered to our teacher leaders because they knew what their job requirements were. They received the support that they needed. They were confident in their abilities, which is a huge piece if you're going to be effective, is you need to be confident. And then even I think a higher layer in that was that they felt entrusted to make decisions, and we felt that that was pretty powerful, and that these are all very high numbers, in my opinion, on how they perceived their first year in the teacher leadership system.
Can I just ask a quick
Yeah.
question? What was N? Did they all respond to the survey?
They did not.
Okay.
They did not.
So what percentage did?
I would say about, on this one, probably about 50 to 60%.
Okay.
But I have better news on another survey in a
Okay.
minute here. Because there were layers of surveys that we participated in. And I'll go back and double check on that for
Okay.
you. So the next layer had to do with teacher leadership effectiveness. And as you can see here, that we wanted to look at growth, and we also had to take some baseline data. And we had a tool that we used. It was actually developed from the state. There was a framework that was produced by the state that had 6 areas, and I believe that you were given a continuum of development that you could look at as I spoke. It's a tool that was meant for self-reflection. The data was anonymously and individually collected, and then it was aggregated into subgroups. Our purpose with this data was not to track individuals, but to see which groups needed what professional learning as we move forward. And our full-time and our part-time teacher leaders, we saw that 91% of those teacher leader roles saw an increase in their score from fall to spring of 10%. And if that wasn't a pretty impressive number, 55% of those saw an increase of 25% in their score in their first year. Our extra duty teacher leaders had, we only received baseline data on those, and there were 5 positions there that we pulled data on, and our mean score was at least 7 out of 10, which is the highest level of applying on that rubric. Now, the BLT, that had 250 people involved in that, so we collected data per BLT. So their data is a little different. 71% of the BLTs assess themselves as having an applying score in every category. So I feel like what this told us is that the teacher leaders were provided professional development that allowed them to grow and to be proficient in what they were doing. Ultimately, though, we wanted to see the effect on instruction. And this slide was provided to us by our friends at K-12 Insight. And back in February, when I presented to you, you encouraged me to have a high return rate. And so I was a bit competitive about it, I think. We collaborated with K-12 Insight, and we had a teacher leader advisory group, and we worked with building administrators and IDS to create a thorough plan to ensure a high response rate. And I asked Marcia, I said, Marcia, what would be an excellent return rate? She said 80. Our average return rate on the 13 surveys was 81%. So I also heard that the largest number of respondents to a survey was 800, And as you can see on this large comprehensive survey, we had 1,018 people who responded to that survey. So very excited about those numbers. And when you add up all the surveys together, it was 2,008 responses. So I feel really blessed by the responses that we had. One of the things that we saw was that nearly 700 people said that the teacher leadership system positively impacted their instructional practice. I think it was 697, but we'll round up. If we move on, another way of looking at this data is that each teacher leader survey asked if a particular teacher leader role impacted instruction, because we had a number of roles that were down here at the ELSC, and we weren't sure exactly if those were being perceived as impacting instruction. So the percentage of people who responded yes to this question is referred to as a favorability rating. So when our favorability rating was at 70%, 81% of our teacher leaders, our teacher leadership roles, met that criteria. When we bumped it up to 75, it dropped down to 44. So that tells you that most people fell between 70 and 75% in terms of their favorability rating. We asked a similar question about the positive impact on student learning. Again, 81% of teacher leadership roles had a favorability rating of 70%, and the favorability rating, when it was raised to 75, that standard then was at 63% of teacher leadership roles had a favorability rating at that rate. I'd like to show you some what they call theme analysis. And a theme analysis is simply there was an open-ended question, then they took all those answers and tried to find a theme to those. One of the things that we saw was that they felt that like the teacher leadership system positively impacted their practice by giving them additional resources. They also gained instructional strategies, increased their ability to collaborate with others, and helped them to reflect on their practices. All the things that when we designed the system it was meant to do. As we continue to look for growth, though, we ask the question, how can we improve? And we're always wrestling with the issue of time. I mean, until they come up with a 25th hour, I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, but we keep working on it. It's in short supply. We noted that scheduling sometimes was difficult, especially in secondary schools. And that had to do primarily with the design of their IDS scheduling. In our first year, we also wrestled with moving the job descriptions from an idea that was on paper to a reality in their daily practice. And so I believe that this year will be easier. People had different expectations on what they thought those jobs should do, and now we're more familiar with what each one is. And I think an important thing that we need to keep in mind is to continue to have a feedback loop, and that came out in the feedback we received, is that always have a feedback loop so that we can make sure that we can continue to adapt the system as it moves forward. So these are the things that I felt contributed to a successful first year. We had professional learning that our teacher leaders said affected their leadership practices positively. Then we had teacher leaders that said then we had teachers that said that their teacher leaders in their lives impacted them positively. So a lot of positivity in our survey data, and I think it was thorough. And I thank you. I think Mary Ellen is going to tell us a little bit about the future.
Does anyone have any questions of Stephen before he?
I wasn't going to scurry.
Just kidding. Okay.
Don't go away.
I wasn't going to
There will be
I was
questions.
going to get a
Okay,
drink.
good.
So where to next? We received some very favorable feedback about the implementation and the planning and the work that's been done by the teacher leadership system in our district. So at your table, you have a couple different things. You have the flow chart for how we do our work. And what I would tell you is how we move forward. That structure of our teacher leadership system has not changed much. Part of the reason it hasn't changed a whole lot is because of the favorable results that we got on how we were implementing. In addition, we felt that there were some roles out in the building that there were minor changes made to. And we have a teacher leadership staff in the Office of Learning and Leadership that looked at maybe those needed changes on job responsibilities. But for the most part, we kept the same positions. We modified job responsibilities in things like the digital learning trainer. That was called technology trainer last year, and it didn't go as well as we had anticipated. So we changed that to a different title, as well as changing some of the responsibilities. We did the same thing with, for example, our instructional design strategists. While we implemented that with Fidelity, we looked at some areas for improvement for that. So we got a lot of feedback about how we could improve those positions, and we did so. At the ELSC, we had 2 positions that we did not keep for this coming year. Stephen's position as the facilitator, and also one of the other professional learning. We looked at the data, not that the data wasn't very favorable for Stephen's position, but what we found is that the majority of the work that Stephen did during that inaugural year of developing all the evaluation tools, working with a group to do that had pretty much been done. And so I'll take that on in my office with the administration of the survey, and then also with the continuum of development that you saw tonight as well, that teacher leaders are completing. So pretty minimal changes for a system that is this big, that has that many people in the system. On the back of that flow chart, what you'll see, whoopsie, I went the wrong, I did. Oh, okay, we're not working together. We are not collaborating well. Okay, so you also have this a little bit larger at your table. So as we think about the support that we provide for students, we call that a multi-tiered system of support. And I know that this diagram with the inverted triangle is familiar to you, because oftentimes we talk about the supports that we're giving to students in classrooms using this. I'm trying to see. Oops, nope, that's not it. I was trying to look at a pointer. So for example, when our students in our classrooms need differentiated support. So if you look at that green triangle, Tier 1 is our core instruction. So all students get core instruction in their homeroom or in their classroom. Tier 2 of that would be some differentiated support in the classroom, where the teacher's meeting with small groups, doing her formative assessments, responding to what those students' needs are in the classroom. So then she or he is providing differentiated support for them. What you see here is what we've done is taken this to, for us, the district is the red part of the pyramid here, and the support that we're providing. And then the school building and the teacher leaders that are working at that school building, they are providing the core support and the differentiated support for the teachers and for the students in that building. So the green, you see the instructional leadership building support. The people that are providing that support are the administrative team, the building leadership team, the IDS, PBIS leaders, and so on and so forth. So they are working on the things that are bulleted next to the green triangle. They are working on the building's professional development. And we know that professional development at each of our school sites looks different on building days, because it's aligned with their school improvement plan and their school improvement goals. All teachers will get that ongoing support. The BLT, PBIS, SIP, meeting facilitation, that's probably more like a Tier 2 with our teacher leaders. We have some teacher leaders that are serving in that capacity. And then carrying out the observation cycle, that is Tier 1 and Tier 2. That observation cycle that's going to be going on at the elementary and the middle schools, and soon the high schools. And then the PLC process, that's for everyone. And that's something that everyone in our schools participates in. And then the last part would be the technology integrationists, which are now the digital learning specialists. Those people will be providing support to teachers at different levels. Our teachers are all at very varying levels with their needs in the area of technology. Then if you look at the other side on the red, our multi-tiered system of support from the central office and from the Office of Learning and Leadership and district is going to look like this. These are the folks that you see on the flow chart that you have. These would be the people that are in the black box and the red boxes on that flow chart. So those people are providing support to the schools to carry out their turnaround work. And again, turnaround work is not happening at all of our schools. It's happening at those schools that are Sign Up For and beyond. And actually, we've added some work that's very similar to that at other schools at the elementary and middle school level. The building leadership team. The building leadership team is helping carry out that school improvement plan, and that's, again, we have professional learning staff that are helping the building leadership teams do their work in their building. We also have Equity Cohort 1 and 2 schools. So Ed Equity last year worked with 4 of our schools very intensely. He is adding 4 more this year. And so those schools would be getting what we would consider Tier 2 or Tier 3 support. It's not for everyone in the building. Learning-centered assessment, learner-centered assessment, we know that we're having working on that at McKinley and Roosevelt middle schools. And again, that's probably more support. It's Tier 2 or Tier 3 for us because that's 2 schools out of 31 that we're supporting in that area. Then again, you look at the learning supports, PBIS team meetings, BLT meetings. So those are happening at all the schools. So the staff that would help with those things would be helping at all the different schools. Our OLL teacher leaders are assigned. Every school has a contact here at the ELSC that they contact when they need support in different areas. So that is pretty much the structure of what we're going to be doing moving forward. Just like the classroom, when we first present something, we look at how it's received by students, who needs additional support, who needs really intensive support, who is beyond and doesn't need a whole lot of support at all. And that's what we're doing with our teacher leadership system. We're very excited about differentiating that support more than we have in the past. We meet on a monthly basis as an OLL teacher leadership team with our teacher leaders and our administrators. And what we do at those meetings is we look at each building. We take each building, we look at the data that we have, the district data, and we identify what's going well in some buildings and how could we possibly replicate that. We began doing that about mid-year last year, I would say, Stephen, and so that's the work that we're doing. So if things, we have like even SWAT teams that go in and will do something if it's just a little thing that needs to be tweaked and you know, just to try to help the teachers in that building and the administrators in that building moving forward. We have buildings that we're using as examples. Just today at the instructional design strategist meeting, secondary meeting, we videotaped one of the administrators and the 2 teacher leaders, the 2 IDS, having a collaborative conversation around that observation and feedback cycle so that we could have a model for what that would look like at the other schools. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing, and again, it's become much more divergent than when we started because we had that plan that we wrote, and we followed that plan with a few modifications during the last school year. Stephen or I would welcome any comments or questions.
Great report. That was excellent information, good data. I always try to encourage as many responses as you can possibly get, so congratulations on the 81%. Questions or comments from the board? Gary?
I'm disturbed a little bit. I'm disappointed in the flow chart. This is the teacher leadership program, and we've removed the teacher leader and moved them into an administrative position. I would have liked to have seen the retention of the leadership be a teacher. And it has nothing to do with personnel, it has nothing to do with individual, but it is just the concept that we developed the multifaceted approach of what a teacher leader is, and we've now turned a teacher leader into administrator.
I must not have explained that very well. Stephen, you can come up too, and I know that you would have some more information to share. So what we did is we looked at the roles and the job descriptions of the teacher leaders. And what we did with Stephen's role, as I mentioned earlier, much of the work that he was involved in, I would say the 2 biggest projects were the continuum of development and then the survey for this past school year. And that was something that we are going to continue using that same format because we want to get some trend data and look at our successes. And also what we did then with the other parts of his job is those were assigned to teachers. I probably didn't make that clear, but I will let Stephen talk a little bit more to those specific things.
Yeah, a number of the things that I worked with last year had to do with creating the tools that we needed in order to evaluate the system. So that continuum of development that you have before you, it started off with essentially the areas that were shaded on the left were what we received from the state. And we combined that with a continuum model so that way we could measure growth. And that took a lot of investment by the teacher leaders and a lot of time to make sure that we were coming up with something that fit all of these different teacher leader roles. So that was one huge project. And then, Marcia and I spent a lot of time working with K-12 Insight, putting that survey together. And the focus groups that we met with helped us build a couple of tools that just needed to be sustained going forward. And we actually went through and we took my job description and the other job description and figured out, well, who's doing these things already and how can we share that work? And so we were thoughtful and purposeful, I believe, about making sure that that those tasks were not being just forgotten, and in many cases are being continued by teacher leaders in some sort. Just not me.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. I just wanted to clarify.
Well, and I'm not devaluing the work that Steve is doing. What I'm saying is perception. What I'm talking about is the overall the way teachers within the program, within our district, would think, are thinking overall about what it is. Stephen is the administrator. Okay, he's on an administrative contract now. That's not the case that it was before. I'm not saying that it isn't valuable work, but I'm just saying I think we've lost the teacher as being the director of the program.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any other comments or questions? Anne?
Yeah, just in the board overview, item 2, the data indicates the quality of instruction and student learning was positively affected. Maybe I missed it, but I'm not sure where I saw the student learning positively affected.
This is the perception data from the teachers that took the survey. 81%.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Wait.
So this is the perception of the impact on student learning,
Yeah.
not actually student learning data.
No, it's a perception.
Okay.
It's all of it is a perception survey.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, and just wanted to end with the teacher leadership system is probably one of the most promising and exciting things that I've seen in my many, many years in education. I think that we've done a very fine job of implementing that system, including, up to 600 plus teachers involved in leadership positions where we were nowhere near that before. And I think it goes back to the system. The system approach is very important. When we wrote the application, we talked about the fact that Cedar Rapids was very rich with teacher leaders in different roles, but we did not have a cohesive system, and that's what we were trying to do. And I think that the feedback that we got is that it tells us that our system is working with a few minor tweaks, which we did. The quote that we started off with when we wrote the application was, no matter what reform strategy is being pursued, the overall quality of a school system rests on the quality of its teachers, and the quality of its teachers depend on the system in place to support them. I feel very pleased that our teachers responded that they felt very much supported. The teacher leaders that were surveyed indicated that they felt that they were supported as well. And it kind of goes back to what Dr. Buck spoke to in his superintendent's report. Our teachers do feel empowered. Our teachers are leaders. And the work that we're currently doing to support that system, we are seeing more positive feedback from teachers about the impact of professional learning. If you think about implementing professional learning communities, it's as much about the adult learner as it is about the child that's learning, and that part's very important. I sent you a slide just a little bit ago that has PLC survey data, in which you'll get to see that as well. We just received that back from our May administration. And in that slide, it talks about how important the professional learning is. And what we saw this past year with professional learning, we had quite a jump in percentage of teachers that said that that had affected and impacted their teaching in a positive way. So I think that also speaks to the fact that the system works. So you can take a peek at that slide as well.
Okay, thank you. Steve Graham, would you like to introduce our next speaker and topic?
Well, I think we're going to let the introductions go to Rob Kleinsmith, who will come up here and introduce the guests that we have today. So,
Great,
Rob?
thank you.
Good afternoon. Before we dig into the details of the energy plan, I wanted to first recognize Mary Ellen. You've got something of mine.
Oh. Well, I took everything. I got the clicker.
Before we get going, I wanted to recognize this volunteer group that meets the first Friday of each month. They volunteer their time to come in and with the sole purpose of discussing on how we reduce energy in the building, in our buildings. So obviously Tammy Carter with the Buildings and Grounds, Chris Tompkins from Alliant Energy, Sam Burgess from Shive Hattery, Daryl Karloff from Baker Group, Matt Shaver from Streff Electric, and Brian Ahern from Michael's Energy. And on behalf of the team here, Brian is going to do the presentation. So Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. So we've got a good start here. You know who the players are. But where did we start? We started with a purpose statement. And I'm going to read part of that. The Cedar Rapids Community School District is interested in creating and implementing an energy efficiency plan. The energy efficiency plan will be a working document used for continuous improvement of the school districts, its individual buildings, and its energy using infrastructure, including systems, equipment, and controls. Accordingly, the energy efficiency plan will be updated periodically as technologies improve and become more cost-effective to employ. The main points are we want to identify opportunities for greater energy efficiency, lower operating and maintenance costs through the implementation of energy efficiency measures, prioritize the implementation of measures to best fit budget constraints, as well as improve operating expenses. Fully utilize energy efficiency rebate programs provided by the utility companies. And rebates will serve to further energy efficiency project implementation. And then finally, maintain, update, and keep current the list of planned and installed energy efficiency measures. To give you a little background, in the summer of 2014, the school district implemented an audit program for all of their buildings, or at least 31 of the buildings. The buildings that weren't included were Washington High School, Jefferson High School, and Kingston Stadium. Washington and Jefferson weren't included mainly because of the construction projects there. The result was a tabulated master table of over 400 energy efficiency measures that could be implemented in this plan. The energy efficiency team, which you've been introduced to, have had several meetings. And those groups, we've been summarizing the groups of energy measures into a specific table. And that table was basically designed around a 3-year payback plan, a 5-year payback plan, and an 8-year payback plan. And there you can see the original table. February 11th of 2015, we met with Superintendent Benson and presented this to him. We talked about the genesis and history of the project. And at that time, the energy team was directed to move forward with option 2. Option 2 is basically all measures with a 5-year payback or less. Okay? And this is a summary of that. It's summarized by the schools, the school types, area education center, elementary schools, high school, middle school, and the support building. And the summary is basically what we found to work in that 5-year plan. Estimated measure cost of about $1.7 million, and potential energy savings, annual energy savings of over $600,000. Examples of 5-year simple payback projects would include retro commissioning for schools with robust temperature control systems. You can read them there. Occupancy controls, lighting changes, boiler tune-ups, ventilation improvements, weather stripping, timers. All of these items are in the plan. On February 17th, the group met with the Master Facility Plan Oversight Committee. And in that meeting, we explained what we had met with Superintendent Benson and discussed, and that we had been directed to go forward with Plan Option 2. And the committee basically applauded the plan and looked forward to us implementing it. The team continues to meet on a monthly basis to manage the outcomes for measures identified in Plan Option 2. There's complete transparency, project documentation, and most of the projects are very small, but the methods that are being employed to process this plan include the following. Construction schedules are kept. Projects are being constructed and grouped into 5 phases to help manage timelines. Early project completions are emphasized to help gain energy savings as soon as possible. Utility company coordination, necessary pre-approvals, paperwork, and utility company assistance is being used to maximize rebates and incentives. Projects are awarded to contractors using the standard practices of the Cedar Rapids Community School District. The energy efficiency team is documenting plan improvements and changes as modifications become necessary. The energy savings cash flows look like this. The first month is the May 1st when we first got the plan working. And once the plan is reached its maturity, we anticipate that the savings should run about $50,000 a month. Okay? So the conclusions that we have here are that the school district will realize the importance of developing and implementing, maintaining an energy efficiency plan. We feel executing a well-designed energy efficiency plan will provide a way to reduce operating costs and help us to continually evaluate and improve operations related to buildings, systems, and equipment. This will improve student and teacher comfort, improve the learning environment, and increase productivity. In addition to that, the benefits cited above, the energy efficiency team anticipates the school district can further benefit from this energy efficiency plan by reinvesting the funding stream created from utility rebates to accomplish other initiatives. Those other initiatives are building automation improvements, funding for important but longer payback measures, engineering studies to help support decision-making, and technology changes that are yet to be identified. So I'll let Rob step up and tell you what our ongoing philosophy is.
As we continue to discuss energy reduction in the district, our energy team is going to continue to focus on the facilities to find those extra dollars that are out there that we can reduce our utility bills with. Obviously, we're going to continue with the green teams on our school campuses to encourage human behavior and for them to be able to find those little things at the campuses. And then the district staff will continue to try to figure out ways to implement policies to conserve, and I think that's a big one that we're going to try to tackle this year. Any questions for us that we're up here? We have a great team with a great knowledge of the people that are standing here to my right about reduction and how to reduce energy, and so I'm excited to work with these guys because they have a vast knowledge of how to do that. So,
Questions or comments, John?
So I just want to clarify, these savings are from the general fund, is that correct? These
Yes,
are in the
they
general
come out of
fund
general fund.
categories.
The beauty,
Yeah,
can
we
you hear me
can.
now? Sorry, can you hear me? Seriously. The beauty of this is that we're taking an investment from our PEPAL fund. And Silo Fund is also qualifying for these investments, but it's the PEPAL fund where we're jumpstarting a $1.8 million investment. Translates into, as you heard Brian talk about, a $600,000 estimated annual savings. And this doesn't just continue on for 3 years. This continues on for a much longer period of time, this $50,000 per month. So it's really a win-win for the school district.
Comments, Ann?
Yeah, I was just wondering what measures will be in place to monitor that the savings, the energy reduction targets have been achieved or exceeded or not.
Well, some of the commissioning that we're going to be doing, we'll put some measurements in place to verify some of those things. As far as actually going out and measuring every exit light that we replace from an incandescent to an LED, those are things that are going to be hard to monitor. But we feel pretty confident in what our savings are going to be, and not to mention with those rebates that we're going to get back from the utilities to reinvest them. So I think we were very conservative on our $600,000 number. I think we can do better than that. And so, we're excited about that opportunity.
So is there someone who can at least look at the utility bills, take into account heat and degree days, all that kind of stuff?
Oh,
Is that
absolutely.
something that would be in there?
We monitor them all the time. We have energy bill monitoring system that we do, and so that's how we got some of the numbers back from the green team bucks for the green team. So yes, we monitor that stuff all the time.
All right, and then just one other question related to the savings is sometimes when you first do a project and then it works great for a month or 6 or maybe a year, and then it just kind of decays, right? So the performance goes down. So what kind of things might be in place either through the temperature controls, the DDC temperature control system, or preventive maintenance schedules, that kind of thing, to make sure that our performance can stay up as close to where it started?
Sure. Well, we've implemented the district had a preventive maintenance program for a long time as far as making sure our equipment is running efficiently. We have ramped up that PM program quite a bit over the past couple of years, and we continue to make that investment into the preventive maintenance side of things. So that is a strength for us going forward. What was your first part of that?
Well, it's just about how we watch for the decay,
Yes.
either by energy audits or preventive maintenance or through the DDC system. Sometimes, I mean, you could wait for a fault until something's broken or not working, but is there like a decay that if something's maybe away from set point but not so far that it's a failure, but it might mean something's not efficient? So I didn't know if that kind of something, if that's something that could be looked at or maybe already are.
Commissioning say.
It's related to commission. It's like
you're talking about persistence of savings.
Yes, it's kind of
And
like
that's
a
one
continuous
of-
commissioning, which is actually trademarked by somebody that we can't use that word, but that's what I'm talking about.
Well, that's one of the things that we deal with in energy efficiency all the time. And one of the simplest ways, and probably a very effective way, is to monitor your utility bills on a regular basis. The school district is changing their culture, making everyone aware that energy efficiency is a top priority, and that will contribute to persistence as well. Some of the work that we're doing involves some deeper studies, and part of the deliverable on those deeper studies is an annual review of the utility bills.
Okay.
So in part, that's already part of some of these programs. I hope and I'm sure that will translate into bigger things for the school district. But you're right, Ann, that's important.
Thanks.
Sure.
Gary, did you have a comment?
Yes, a couple of things. Steve, will the savings that we see from this energy be more energy efficient? Will we move that into a specific line item on the budget so that I'm hoping that as we move on that we can look at maybe some larger outlay projects, but with a greater savings also?
That's a very good question, Gary, very good question. The scorecard for fiscal 16 general fund budgeting was a $200,000 earmark for improved energy savings. It was sort of the first installment because, as you heard Brian say, it was in May that we began this journey of investment. And our yield of investment on our first fiscal period is probably going to yield less than $600,000. It's our hope that $200,000 is a conservative number, but that's the number on the scorecard. We expect that to ramp up in fiscal 17 to a $600,000 number, but it's all based upon relativity. If you've got change in temperature and you're equalizing that, you're looking at CCFs and you're looking at kilowatt savings, it may be based upon what occurs on the rate side. So again, there's some moving parts here, but it's our hope that a $600,000 annual savings will occur. Now, on the other side, on the facility infrastructure funding side of the equation, Brian also talked about the savings, and Rob talked about the savings on rebate. We have significant rebate savings coming in here with our investment. We'll be able to redouble that or to reinvest that back into future energy savings initiatives, and that's sort of a work in progress at this point in time as technologies change. So this is all very good stuff, and it's very important to the school district, given the general fund budget pressures that we have been experiencing as of late, to take that pressure off wherever we can find it.
Well, as those projects, and I would hope that as those projects in the future come forth, we'll be able to see a line item that'll offset and say, okay, here's how we're going to be able to pay for it.
The short answer to that question, Gary, is the line item or items will be our energy, electricity, and natural gas. And I'm not sure how much water really is affected by this, but those are the three major utility lines, and we have moved those back by $200,000 in fiscal 16, and hopefully we can continue doing that.
I have one more question, I think. As we do some of these efficiency projects, are we moving the control of some of the climate and environment farther away from the individual classrooms? And what I'm concerned about is we had some complaints coming out of some buildings this last winter or early spring about some cold rooms and so on, and not having the capacity to be able to increase the heat because of it was being controlled off-site.
That's accurate, Gary. We are going more towards a centralized control system through the district. Whenever my experience has been is whenever you change a standard practice, what was before, it takes a training time for the staff to become accustomed to it. The district has a standard, temperatures. This is what we set our thermostats at. When we don't have control in the district, those thermostats are up and down. We're not 100% sure what they're setting at. So once we go to a centralized system and we set that temperature exactly where it needs to be, there is a little bit of a training period for all to understand that and get accustomed to it. Once again, we are looking at a team this year to put together to set those set points. And so we're going to be talking about what those temperatures should be in a classroom. And so once we get that standardized, we'll set that policy and we'll move from there.
I think part of some of the instances that I'm recalling, it might have been, again, you talk about education and bringing everybody up to speed, but I think it was a change in a schedule, maybe somebody coming in on a Saturday, somebody coming in on a day that normally or would be scheduled that students wouldn't be there, but they had changed and modified their schedule and put people in. So I understand it can be difficult, but as we move forward, I would think even through an education process that we all know that we need to think ahead if we're going to do these, if there be a ability to adjust the programs to oversee that.
We do have some flexibility Principals do have some flexibility in some of the classrooms. Even teachers have some flexibility in some of those classrooms to have site-based control versus having just the district having all control. Your example of a teacher coming in on a Saturday, there is some, like the new geothermal project we're doing at Hiawatha, there is some control in that classroom for an hour override. If they're going in for an hour and need to boost up the heat or hit the air conditioning, there is that flexibility in there to do that. And so we do have some, we also have the principal that also has access to the DDC system, and they can do a manual override as well, so.
So the principals do have override. I mean, we experienced that at Washington High School. On a weekend, there's a huge event. I mean, these buildings are being used all the time, which is great. But the principals do have override capacity, because I think there's some confusion in the buildings.
They currently don't at Washington because of the new geothermal, but we are working on it aggressively right now to get it to control. I know Jefferson, I think they just had training on their system.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's catching up to the progress of the facility and the renovation of that facility. But shortly afterwards, they will have. They do have a lot of events there. I know our staff, Tammy, spends a lot of time on just scheduling and trying to get the air conditioning on or the heat on, and for our events or whatever. This way, the principals have the control to say, I need this room for an hour, and push the button, and it's there for them.
That's good news.
Ann?
I was just going to say, it's a lot with electronic access. If there's an event outside normal hours, as much as possible, it needs to be scheduled in advance so the building's unlocked and the air conditioning is where it needs to be. So it's part of that culture change, and we'll get there.
Great report, and I want to thank all four of the volunteers who spend an hour a month in our district advising and working with our district staff to maximize efficiencies. It is a great general fund savings for us, and commend you, Rob, because, Brian, I'll ask you, how many school districts do you work with across the state that have this aggressive plan for energy efficiency?
This is rare.
And this is a very aggressive plan, so that's great. We appreciate that work, we really do. Thank you all, and thanks for coming to the meeting tonight and being here to support this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Gary.
I'm up?
Yes, you are.
You know, how about, did we already appoint? Oh, no, that's after me. Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Well, isn't this just a nice tie-in to someone in our state leadership saying that we need to be more efficient in our school funding and how we do things? I wish they would have been here tonight to see how aggressively we're trying to squeeze every penny out of our budget that we can. So we're down to, I emailed, and I hope you were able to open it, a spreadsheet that had the results from the last meeting, and it looks like we have identified supplemental state aid as one of our priorities, and school district flexibility or local control. So we have two. IASB is asking for 4, so we need to try to come up with or determine a couple more. And as Nancy and I were talking, this is difficult because all of these are key issues. They all affect student outcomes, at least some maybe more than others, but they all directly affect the work that we do. And trying to pick out, well, favor one thing over another is difficult. I think we have to keep in mind that we are only one of 300 school boards that are going through the same process, and so our results are going to be filtered in that process. So
everyone had an assignment, and that was to review and come prepared to select 2 more that we all agreed on. Has anyone done that? John?
So I've gone back, and I mean, our priority as a board, one of our top goals is student achievement. We've addressed finance, we've addressed the local control issue. Taxes, to me, in general, we tie that in with the finance, and I understand that. So I actually looked back at what Nancy said, and after thinking about what the staff and the buildings are saying, the at-risk student waiting, dropout prevention, and the mental health funding are two of the largest barriers that we're facing, and we're woefully underfunded nationally for those things. So I think I'm going to jump on board with Nancy on her two items, student achievement. It's H, at-risk student waiting and dropout prevention, and O, the mental health funding for our schools. You know, with all the cuts that are going on, I just see that as a priority. So we have, well, it's the student achievement and equity grouping that.
It's the first one, and then it would be letter H, at-risk waiting and dropout prevention, and then O, mental health funding.
Okay. Did you?
I'm sticking with, yes, I want to stick with the ones I had.
And Ann?
I was looking at some more finance-related ones, but I think right now that I was leaning towards the state penny for school infrastructure, but right now I don't see that as being at risk. So I would swing that vote over. I agree with John of looking at things that have a more direct impact on achievement. I think that's a really good strategy and sends a good message. And then I was also looking at, so I guess I would swing the one vote over to the at-risk student waiting and dropout prevention, but the other one, even though it is financial, I still think fundamentally the foundation formula is still an issue, and we are not getting the same money per pupil as other districts across the state.
So I did take.
So I was looking at finance letter B. Yeah.
But just you're absolutely right. We get $175 less per student, I believe it is, than other districts do, and have since the formula was created. I've talked to several legislators about that. They all recognize it and want to remedy it. So I don't think there's an argument to be had there.
Okay.
It's just them carving out that money to do that. And
Okay.
that's the big stumbling block. So I don't know if
And
that
the state
affects-
penny does have a sunset clause coming up, right? I think that's the worry. So.
Steve? December 31st of 2029.
So, I mean, you can't let that keep going on, but.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to also support H and O.
So your point on the foundation formula is that it's recognized as an issue and it doesn't necessarily need to be a priority with the IASB. It's more of a figuring out a solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would swing over and agree with H and O.
All right.
I would like to bring up, we did all support supplemental state aid, but I would like to have a discussion of whether we want to keep it, from our board's perspective, if we want to keep that at 6% or if we want to change it to a different number. Because we do have the option of just approving them or approving them with edits.
True. Good point.
So I wanted to at least bring that up. I don't think 6 is realistic, but I'm not sure how important that is.
I think that, for me personally, it's important that we keep something in there at the level that, one, we've fallen so far behind in funding. It really will take at least 6% or more probably to catch us up to where we need to be. Whether the state can actually afford it or not is another matter, and we'll have to work through that. But it gives us some more flexibility so we don't end up down in the 1 or 2% range again. I mean, we really need to have 4% to keep moving us forward in all of these needs, because we just continue to slip as a state, and that's not acceptable, so.
Nancy?
Stretch goal.
And you saying 6%? Is that what you said? Right now?
It's listed, if you look at that, on the papers that were.
Under Finance A.
Under Finance, letter A. Rate of, it basically says, set the allowable growth 400 days or 14 months prior to certification and at the rate of 6%. So they've already missed the 400 days. Okay, we know that. And I was just saying, I think we need to have a discussion of whether we want to keep that at 6% or whether our board should look at modifying that. And I can see both ways. I can see having a stretch goal saying, we really think we need to have 6% to get us where we need to be. Or do we say we want to put something out there that's more reasonable? And I can argue both sides to myself, so I just wanted to have a discussion about it before we just pushed it through.
And I agree with John, we should keep it at 6. We are in need of the funding, you know, and I think if we lower it, I agree with the 6%.
Gary?
I can't agree with the 6% if we don't look at funding public education. Support sufficient state revenue to adequately fund public education as Iowa's #1 priority. This is under taxes and funding for public education. We will see. We have seen over the last 4 or 5 years a continual reduction in state revenue, and it has not to do so much with the ability to generate it as the fact that we have seen tax rebates, we've seen reduction in tax rates, we've seen givebacks that have reduced our funding. And so there's legislation, the governor has been quite right. We can't, you know, the current budget does not support 4%, doesn't support 3%. So we will hear if we have 6%, 4%, the budget isn't there, won't allow us to do it. So what we have to do is, my priority still would be support state revenue, adequate funding. I also think the at-risk weighting and dropout prevention, we have to, it's effective. It's helped us to be able to move forward. It's an area that we need. Mental health is certainly an issue, but if we had more funding, I think we could take care of some of the mental health and some of the other things.
So can you tally that up?
I can. And I think we have our 4. So
Okay.
we'll look at risk weighting and dropout prevention, along with the mental health and initiative, along with this supplemental state aid and the school district flexibility. I don't know where we're at with the allowable growth. We want to submit an amendment to it to reduce it to 4%, 6%, leave it.
I would leave, I think you've made a good point. These are some of our top priorities. All of these are really pretty strong arguments that need to get made. And so as an association, they'll take this, and many of these things will end up being priorities for the association. So
I can submit these tomorrow on behalf of the board if you'd like, Gary.
Thank you. You have them? I do. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
And the rest of them, we will, not just going to say that we're accept the rest of those that we didn't talk about, just not as a priority.
Thanks
Top
for the
priority.
discussion on that. It just helps about the 6%, so we're all on the same page.
Okay, great. Now we're going to turn to the appointment of the school district treasurer. And Ann, would you mind reading the recommendation as a motion? Or
I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Steve Graham as the Cedar Rapids Community School District Treasurer of the Board of Directors in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, for a term of 1 year beginning August 10th, 2015, and shall qualify for said appointment by taking the oath of office in the manner required by Section 277.28, and thereafter shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified, and that this action shall be entered of record in the minutes.
second.
this is a roll call action.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal. Aye. Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Aye. Steve, do you want to come up and I'll read you the oath of office?
I'm beginning my 19th year.
19.
Who's counting?
Do you want to hold up your right? We, Steve Graham, solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of the Superintendent Administrator in the County of Lynn, State of Iowa, as now or hereafter required. If so, please respond by saying aye. "19 years, that's a long time." Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Jill to talk about some conditions of employment and issuance of administrative contracts.
Thank you. This was a very difficult negotiating year, and I want to thank all of our associations for their patience as we waited to hear about state funding. I also want to thank them all that agreements were held as close as we could to our growth rate so that we can stay within our budgets. So I appreciate that. So I would ask the board tonight to approve. There's 3 different approvals I'm asking for. One is I've grouped them together in non-bargaining agreements, one in bargained agreements, and also the issuance of administrator contracts.
Any questions or comments? Again, we want to thank the administrative staff for taking 0 in their base wage. It was a very difficult budget year, and so we very much appreciate that and recognize that, so thank you. This is going to be roll call, and it's recommended that the Board of Education approve the 2015-16 terms and conditions of employment for 5 Seasons Learning Centers, Rockwell Child Development Center, administrators and non-administrative meet and confer groups. So roll call action.
Director Rosenthal. Aye. Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
Aye. Second one is recommended that the Board of Education approve the 2015-16 terms and conditions of employment for Chicago and Midwest Region Workers United SEIU Local 497, Food Service Cedar Rapids Organization of Teachers Associates, CROTA SIEU Local 199, Educational Office Professionals Union Secretaries SEIU Local 199, Service Employees International Union Employee Groups. This is a roll call action.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
And do we need to go back to the, did we
You do
approve
the issuance of administrative contracts.
contracts?
Okay.
It's okay.
I think you combined it with the first.
I do too.
We'll just do a separate roll call if you're okay with that.
Yes, let's go ahead and do a separate roll call for the issuance of contracts.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
Aye. Am I done?
You're done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's have a great start to the school year. Thank you for all your hard work. Let's hope it's a very successful one from a budget perspective and a student achievement perspective. And as John said earlier tonight, please pay attention and vote for school board candidates across the entire state. Everyone's majority of their board is up for re-election, so pay attention and please vote. Thank you. No further business, we stand adjourned.